Many states are opening vaccine eligibility to Americans with high-risk conditions such as cancer, chronic kidney disease, heart conditions, COPD, and more. In many areas, it also includes people who are classified as clinically obese with a body mass index over 30. A new report from the World Obesity Federation found that increased body weight is the second greatest factor in hospitalizations and death among people suffering from COVID-19.
They tend to have a higher likelihood of needing to go to the critical care unit and needing higher rates of oxygen, higher risk of needing to go on the ventilator.
No matter the criteria or not, the fact that we're vaccinating more and more people is just a move for all of us in the right direction so that hopefully we can get back to some semblance of the norm.
State leaders make their own decisions on when groups are eligible, but many people are not happy about obesity being considered a risk factor that should get early dibs at the vaccine. Joining us now to talk about this, Dr. Fatima Cody Stanford. She is an assistant professor of medicine in Massachusetts General Hospital. She's also an obesity medicine physician and adults, adolescents, and children at MGH Weight Center. Thanks for joining us tonight, Doctor.
Thank you for having me.
I guess the first question becomes, what are the risk factors for those who are overweight when we're talking about COVID?
So it's important for us to recognize that obesity is an actual disease. And I think one of the things that people don't realize is that it's a disease. It's not just how you look. It's a disease process characterized by a high degree of inflammation. And so when we have that high degree of chronic inflammation associated with obesity, the disease, it doesn't play well with the acute inflammation of COVID-19. As such, patients that have the disease of obesity do have a risk of dying that's much higher, sometimes 3 to 4 times the likelihood of those that are leaner in weight. So it's important for us to recognize that this is important. We need persons with obesity to be vaccinated. We want them to live. We want them not to need ICU care and be on the ventilator. And that's why I think that this really is a prudent and a really important step for those that have the disease of obesity.
Doctor, I want to read a quote from the chairwoman of the Obesity Action Coalition, who was featured in a USA Today article. She said, "Weight isn't always within your control." With that in mind and what we know about the risk of obesity and COVID complications, is the right move to get obese Americans in this next phase of the vaccine?
Yeah, one thing I'm going to change. I don't want to call people obese. Obese is a label. Obesity is a disease. And so that language can be highly stigmatizing for my patients that actually have this disease of obesity. But hands down, it's the right move to get patients with obesity vaccinated. When we're looking at the vaccines, the Pfizer, Moderna particularly, we saw that patients with obesity had a similar level of immunity with regards to the vaccines as persons that were leaner in weight status. So if we know that they're dying quicker, we know they're getting sicker and having much more potent disease processes associated with COVID, we need to make sure that they're getting vaccinated.
Have you had a chance to talk to any of your patients? What was their response when the news broke that the possibility of them being moved to the next group? They're up to get the vaccine. What was that thought process? What was their feelings about that?
There were some that felt, a little bit guilty that their weight status would cause them a higher likelihood of getting the vaccine sooner than others. But many of my patients were actually very pleased to actually finally be able to get this vaccine so that we can return to some sense of normalcy here in the United States and around the world as we try to navigate these issues with social distancing, physical distancing, and getting back to work. So I think that it's important to see that there's different camps in terms of what people think. But overall, for my patients that have obesity that are in care, they were very relieved to see that they were moving up in the ranks of the consideration for the vaccine.
All right, doctor, before we go, I want you to talk a little bit about herd immunity. How much does that play into the decision when these next groups come up and when they're due?
Well, we're kind of far away from herd immunity. We're thinking that in terms of getting the vaccine, if we get about, 60% of the population getting vaccinated, that we'll finally be able to feel normal, right? We'll be able to convene with people, go to birthday parties, things of that sort. I think that it's important for everyone that's listening to think about getting vaccine, regardless of your weight status or not. But for my patients that are out there that have this disease of obesity, do not wait. If you are up and ready to get the vaccine, please go forward. Get the vaccine. It will only make you healthier. We don't want you in the hospital, and I definitely don't want you to die.
Dr. Fatima Cody Stanford, thank you so much for taking your time.
Thanks so much for having me.